I will record on this computer. All right, so if we want to talk about some of the solutions economists and other policymakers are suggesting for a solution to combat climate change, we're probably never going to solve it. It's never going to, it's not going to be perfect, but what can we do? Let's focus on carbon emissions as this one thing we could talk about. We could focus on that, how to reduce our carbon emissions. And on Friday, we're going to have one person talk about a carbon. Is it a carbon tax, or no? It's a cap and trade. It's a cap and trade. Nobody's actually talking about a carbon tax. Maybe I'll be the one who's talking about a carbon tax, because I didn't assign it to either of the. It's not even a possible thing for you to debate. So we will talk about that. There's a cap and trade system that is potentially being proposed that says mostly businesses that are emitting carbon into the atmosphere, they are capped at a certain level. There's a certain just a certain level of carbon emissions that if they do nothing, that they're not allowed to emit more than that. If they do, they would pay a large fine. And we would make this level pretty low, so that it would come at some cost to the firm. They would have to find a way to reduce their carbon emissions. But we would allow these permits to be traded. That's the trading part of cap and trade. Cap and trade says, yes, bad news is you have to lower your carbon emissions by 40%. The good news is you can trade with other companies for these permits. If you want to, why do you do that? Why do economists want there to be some trade in a situation like this? It's because generally the firms know better than we do how valuable or how costly it would be to reduce their carbon. If you had to completely change everything about the way you made your product, that could be such a costly thing to do that you would go out of business. And so a firm like this would really try to find some other way to continue doing what they're doing. And the idea is we should allow them to do that. If you're truly an extreme environmentalist, you may say, that's a problem. We shouldn't allow this firm to continue to emit 1 million tons of carbon into the atmosphere. So if you have that belief, then this debate really won't apply to you, because we're not even discussing that. What we are discussing is what's maybe the most efficient way to reduce carbon emissions to what we think is a good, appropriate level. Anyways, the story behind cap and trade is a company that it would be really costly for them to abate. Oftentimes these words, abatement, is reduction of the costs associated with reducing your carbon emissions. If your company has really high abatement costs, and there's another company, maybe in another industry, who has actually pretty low abatement costs. The idea of a cap and trade system is the people with the high abatement costs can purchase carbon emission permits from the people with the low abatement costs. And what will happen? The people with the low abatement costs will actually, not only will they reduce their carbon to what the government says they have to do, they'll reduce it even more. They'll go even beyond what they're required to do, because it'll be in their financial interest to do so. Because the more that they can find some way to reduce, like they've gone really far to reduce carbon emissions, but they'll find some way to go even further, because they know that they can sell those permits to people who want them. And so a lot of economists have this idea that decentralizing these sorts of decisions is efficient, rather than having the government tell you exactly what you have to do. If I write some regulation and it's a law, it says you have to follow this law no matter what. Um, how, how does the government know what's the right levels to set for each different factory and each different industry all across the country? It's hard to know. So one advantage, according to this idea, is that you can create a market for these permits, and then firms will decide on their own. You don't have the government telling you exactly how much carbon you have to, how much abatement has to happen. They'll decide on their own how much abatement they want to happen, and the price will sort of guide their decisions. The price of these permits will guide it. So that's one proposal. I have to say, I think this proposal is getting less and less popular. Am I wrong about that? Have you guys you guys are young people talking maybe about what's in fashion today, what's cool. I sort of think the other thing we're going to be talking about Friday is much more fashionable, and that is the Green New Deal. The Green New Deal, so the thing about cap and trade is that it's revenue neutral, right? The government isn't paying really so much to do this. They may have to pay to monitor it, to enforce. Enforce is the word. They will have to pay to enforce these sorts of the cap or the trading, but otherwise it's pretty quote unquote revenue neutral. The Green New Deal is not revenue neutral. The other thing we're going to debate Friday, and I'm telling everybody this as a way for you to write your homework on Friday. Excuse me. Remember, your homework on Friday is not just a for or against like it usually is. I actually want you to pick one of these two, or a third option, which is none of the above. I don't want either of them. You know what? If you want the third option, could be a carbon tax, just a straight up carbon tax on everything that causes carbon emissions. You could talk about that too as a third option. But if you would, please write me something. It doesn't have to be that long. I usually say a few hundred words. Isn't that what I say? About which option you think would be the best for the country. Something like a cap and trade system, which is revenue neutral, a carbon tax, which is actually revenue gaining, right? When I say the government would make money off a carbon tax, firms would have to pay it. And undoubtedly, some of that would be passed on to the consumer. So maybe we would all have to pay it. You know how that works, right? If a firm's costs go up, oftentimes they will find some way, maybe prices will go up. And it depends on the industry, depends on the industrial organization. But okay, that would be perhaps a source of government revenue would be a carbon tax. And then, but I have to say, people don't like taxes. It's hard to sell a tax to the American people. Like, hey, American people, I've got this great idea, a new tax. Most people will say, I'm going to vote you out next time because I hate taxes. Not most people, but a lot of people. Okay, but like if you want to write about that in your homework, I would welcome that. And then the third option is the Green New Deal. What is the Green New Deal? I think it's Tina is going to be telling us about it. Is that right, Tina?
Yes, I am.
Have you done some research about the Green New Deal, what it actually means?
Not really, but I started some slides.
2 days. Oh no.
I know. I started some slides. So
okay.
There's just been a lot this week, okay?
Oh yeah, it's been hectic. I understand. But just like a one sentence. Okay, I'll do it. I'll try to summarize what the Green New Deal is in the short summary. It's a government stimulus package, I would say, because the government is going to have to pay for a lot of restructuring of the economy. you know, how will the government decide who they're paying and what? There'll have to be some agency created that will organize this, and it would have the strict goal of reducing carbon emissions. That's one thing, but also um, transforming our society and our economy into a more sustainable, renewable resource economy where we sort of it's not just about what are we doing now, like, okay, right now here's our carbon emissions, we're trying to lower that. It's actually about forever into the future too, that it's going to take some radical shift to make our businesses and ourselves, our consumers, able to shift from fossil fuels and um, the types of buildings that use a lot of energy, transforming them into the types of buildings that use very little energy, so that in 20, 40, 60, 80 years from now, we're not still just having these huge energy demands and having a hard time to come up with them. And of course, it's also to stimulate uh, the production of that sort of renewable energy. So a lot of it's about energy, but actually not all of it. But what you should know about the Green New Deal is that it's a government spending intended to uh, help fight climate change, to sort of get us. That's what the word green means. In this case, sometimes people green is money or green is envy. In this case, it's green is environmentalism and sustainability. And and of course, the New Deal. You guys know this? The New Deal was a similar massive government expenditure from the 1930s that was orchestrated by FDR. Franklin Roosevelt was the president at the time, and uh, he and his colleagues created a government expenditure package that helped, at least most people think it helped get the American economy out of the Great Depression. So it gave a lot of people jobs, building infrastructure, that a lot of which we still use today. Like the idea was, we need people that have money so that they'll buy things. How can we do this? Let's just create a lot of government jobs so that all those people can get money and they will put it back in the economy. And that's called the New Deal. So the Green New Deal is a neologism created from that, a new phrase that means we're going to do that same thing. It's what we did in the 1930s, we're going to do that in the 2020s, except instead of the goal of getting everyone back to work, that actually will be one of the ancillary goals of the Green New Deal, is to give people jobs doing things for sustainable energy. You know, I don't know. I watched the debates. I heard Joe Biden talk about this. He said, fighting for climate change is actually good business. I mean, you know, but being more sustainable energy, there's a lot of jobs in that. We want Americans to be the ones who are making windmills and solar panels and retrofitting things, old buildings, so that they're more sustainable. And so that's the same idea. That's what the Green New Deal needs. So if you say you are in favor of that, you should give me some arguments that say why it's efficient to do it. In fact, why it's worth it to do it. Because what happens if the government has a big expenditure, but it doesn't raise taxes? You should know that from this class. That causes an increase in the deficit, which causes an increase in the debt. Another thing we talked about in this class is what happens when there's a large debt. You might not see those consequences immediately, but they are there. The US Treasury is not this infinite supply of cash that we can draw on. Every dollar that we borrow has to be paid for eventually. So if you're going to argue that you support the Green New Deal, I would hope that you somehow not, you're not just saying, well, we need to do it because the environment needs it. Okay, but argue why it's actually more efficient to do that, to make this expenditure now is going to be worth it to save us money later somehow, or just, yeah. You can also talk
I
about.
got you. I got you.
What do you mean? You understand me?
Yes, no, I understand you.
Okay. Well, oh, by the way, I'm not just talking to you, Tina. I was talking to everybody who is has to write their homework up for Friday.
Okay.
But yeah, sure. I mean, feel free to use any of my suggestions that I just said. Okay, let's talk about less specific issue, which is common pool resources and negative externalities. Those were the last two exercises that we did. Let's go talk about those exercises again. Oops, I don't want to do that. I want to share screen. Let's share this one. Here we go. Okay, this was our exercise on whaling, where there was 5 people in one ocean and there were 5 people in one ocean and 5 people in the other. They could hunt for whales, and the more whales they hunted, the less were available in the future. And the question was, what's the most sustainable and efficient way to be hunting for whales? And on your own, you perhaps hunted a little bit too many. It wasn't that bad. We didn't see everybody choosing 10 the first round. Daniel did. Daniel wanted to catch them whales. But everyone else was less than 10, which means they didn't go all out. This is sort of on their own what they chose to do. Hey guys, Daniel tried. He's still making excuses for why he chose 10 in the first round. He says because he thought you guys were going to be uncooperative. That's why he was uncooperative. Anyways, what role is there for government intervention? We talked about this. It's that governments can help organize and establish kind of property rights. Actually, property rights would have solved this whole thing. The same thing with the original example of tragedy of the commons, which is cows grazing on common lands. That's why it's called the commons. It's like the common lands that people use. One way to solve the tragedy of the commons, if you recall, is just to charge people for using the land. Say, well, you can use the land, but you have to buy a permit. And if you do, and you choose the right number of permits, you can't choose too many permits because then the problem will just exist again. But you also shouldn't choose 0 permits. Remember, let me refer back to, actually people did fairly well on this quiz. I think I haven't graded it all the way yet. I apologize for that. I'm sorry, I want to go to Zoom again. Oh, I have to stop share. Common pool resources. Yeah, I gave you an example in the quiz that was very similar to this. And I just want everyone to remember what the takeaway is. The role of government intervention isn't to say nobody should be able to use the commons. It's also not to say, well, everybody who wants to can use the commons. The role of government, at least what an economist like me would say, is to try to get the most efficient outcome to occur. And in this case, it was 3 steers. The way to get exactly 3 steers on this common land is to sell permits for exactly 3 steers. Actually, there are other ways. Another way would be to establish property rights where they can do it on their own. But I just want to emphasize that there is this intermediate ground. It's not, and let's think about this when we talk about carbon emissions, because we care. Let's what do you guys think? I think we can all assume that we care about the environment. At least we don't want the global temperatures to increase 5 degrees Celsius by the time we're retiring 50 years from now. I'm a little bit older than you, so it'll be less than 50 years for me, but is that true? I mean, is there anybody here who's just like, no, screw it, let the global temperature rise as high as you want, let those ice caps melt in Greenland and ice and Antarctica. More hurricanes, the better. Probably nobody here thinks that, right?
No.
Okay, Tina doesn't think that. Okay, so let's just assume, and no, at least no one's willing to voice this sort of opposition. This would be a rather misanthropic belief, which is that I don't really care about humanity and their survival on this planet. It's something people could believe, but let's put that out of this class and say everyone here actually does care about the planet. Then the goal is, well, what do we do to make it more livable in the future? There's some sort of efficiency involved here. Even if you think, yes, we want to make the planet livable, it really shouldn't be government prevents everyone from doing something. Government just like uses a machete to just say slap. Whoosh, all of this activity is illegal. All of this type of economic activity is completely illegal. No one can do it anymore. That seems like a rather blunt instrument. That in my mind, it's kind of like saying, well, there are no cows allowed on this land, on this grazing land. It's just overgrazing, and we want to just have zero cows. That would somehow be inefficient too. There's the best thing we want is to weigh the marginal costs. I think I meant benefit and cost, and I got bot. Maybe I'm thinking of Russian bots. They're on my mind, like using Twitter, Russian bot. Okay. No, marginal costs to society, the entire marginal costs to society, those should be weighed against the marginal benefits to society, right? If you've taken nothing from this class, that's one of the things you should get from this class. This is a class about contemporary economic issues and informing you as a person who's an American and somebody who's going to be a voter and needs to think about these issues in an economic way. The economic way to think about these issues is to weigh the costs, all of the costs, social costs, the external costs on the margin versus the benefits of something. You want to raise the minimum wage? Okay, but who's being affected in this negative way? Who's benefiting? And weigh those. You want to have a new trade deal with China? What are the marginal costs and benefits of that? Okay, same thing here with environmental issues. Examples like the tragedy of the commons say that there could be something in between the extremes. It's not that nobody's ever allowed to create a power plant anymore. All power plants have to shut down right now, versus the other extreme, which is everyone should be able to burn as much coal as they want whenever they want. There's a middle, and how do you find the efficient middle ground? Weigh the sum of the social marginal costs and the sum of the social marginal benefits. Okay, that's what I'm teaching you how to do. Okay, what about negative externalities? Let's go on to that, which is the other experiment we did. We did the whaling experiment, that's common pool resources, and we did the pollution experiment. Those are negative externalities. What I have on this PowerPoint right now, maybe I should go to full screen. There we go. Is that negative externalities represent a market failure because it doesn't get the marginal costs equal to the social marginal costs are not equal to the social marginal benefits in the case of a negative externality. Why? It's because when people buy and sell a good, they don't care about the external costs. They only care about their own personal costs. And that's what happened in the pollution experiment at first. You guys you chose a quantity that was probably too high because you weren't terribly concerned about the external cost that you were causing on everybody else, or sometimes called the social cost, which is you should define that as the cost of producing the good, the pecuniary, that means the money you have to pay to produce that good, as well as the external costs that you're imposing on somebody else. And if it's causing a pollution, if you're causing everybody else's water to be dirty, that's an external cost that you're causing. So I want you to think of this now as shifting the supply curve up. Sometimes I talk about shifting left and right. We talked about that for like immigration causing a shift in the labor supply curve. It would shift it to the right because you're really thinking of quantity that's being increased here. Now you should think of it as a shift up in the supply curve. You guys see why is it up instead of left or right? Why does a negative externality shift the supply curve up in terms of social costs? If you don't know, I'll tell you. That's my job. I'm the instructor. I'm supposed to tell you. I'll tell you shortly if you don't know. But okay, if the free market level of, let's look at this third bullet point. The free market level of production is where demand, I can't even read my own thing, meets the original supply curve. And this is inefficient because of the externality. If we just allow the market to do whatever it wants freely, it'll choose a point, which I'm arguing is inefficient because it ignores the externality. What would be better? What would be better than the free market level? It would be the socially efficient level of production. How do you know what the socially efficient level of production is? Well, that's where the demand curve meets not the original supply curve, but the shifted supply curve. And remember, I asked you this question, can anybody explain why this supply curve shifts up? And nobody said anything. It means either you're not paying attention or you just don't really understand the question or you just don't know the answer. Either way, I should tell you. Would somebody have a comment? Hello? No. Nobody has anything to say? I can't hear you. If you're saying something, I can't hear you. I think my volume is up. Yeah, it is. I heard Tina speak, so I can definitely hear people speak when they speak. Okay, so let me explain now, I think on the next slide, why the negative externality causes a shift up in the supply curve and why that means the free market level is inefficient and what we could do to get to the socially efficient level. I can tell you those things. That's actually not that hard. Let's see it. Let's take a look. I think I got this from some British website because everything's in pounds if you look at it instead of dollars. Who cares? Just the curves. I could have made this graph myself, but I'm lazy. I said, oh, I'll just take this. It says exactly what I want to say. Who cares that it was done in Britain? Somebody needs to get in there. So take a look at this graph. On the x-axis, we have the output. That means how much quantity are you producing as all of the firms total. What's the total quantity of some good that you're producing? On the y-axis is both the costs and the benefits, but you can think of it in terms of dollars, or in this case, pounds. This marginal private cost curve, that's actually the supply curve. That's what you think of as the supply curve. Because at each level, a firm, when they decide, yes, I do want to produce this particular good, it's worth it for me to produce it because if the price is above this point in my marginal private cost curve, usually it's just called marginal cost, then it's worth it for me to do it. If the price is below the marginal cost, then I say, no, it's not worth it for me to do it. Therefore, that's the supply curve, this bottom one. The marginal private benefit curve, we could think of that as demand. In fact, that is demand. The reason you're willing to buy something is because the benefit to you is greater than the price. If the benefit to you were less than the price, you wouldn't buy it. And therefore, this decision of whether or not you buy something is entirely determined by your marginal benefit of that good. Therefore, the demand curve itself is a representation of your benefit or your marginal benefit for the good. So this original, let's say, look at P1Q1. P1Q1 is what happens if we do nothing. If we do nothing in this market where there's a negative, look at the head, this is negative externalities in production. If we just ignore the negative externalities and say, anybody who wants it can buy it, anybody who wants to sell it can sell it at any price you want. What will happen in equilibrium? In equilibrium of this market is P1 and Q1. Do you guys agree with that? This is like introductory of economics. You all should have had at least one course in microeconomics, and this should have been drilled into your head in that course. If it hasn't been drilled into you, then whoever was your instructor in your first class of the principles of micro didn't do their job. Okay. So, but now let's look at the negative externality that's caused. It's actually a shift up in this curve because there aren't just private costs to you, there's external costs, or what here that's called social costs. And this curve that's been shifted up is the true cost to society of producing whatever this is, whatever this output is. Remember, in our pollution experiment, when you produced something, it caused a direct cost on you, but it also caused a cost on the other people in your group. And so the other people in the group were paying this cost. That explains this difference here, the difference between the private cost and the social cost. In our experiment that we did on, what is today, Wednesday? It was on Monday. We did this experiment on Monday where you chose the quantity. I calculated the total pollution that was created, and you all paid the cost of the total pollution. You didn't just pay the cost of your own pollution, you paid the total cost. That explains why this blue curve is above. And this also explains why it's shifted up, doesn't it? It's shifted up because it's the y-axis that measures the cost. So when the cost goes up, we got to increase it in the direction of the positive y-axis. So that's the answer to the question I was posing earlier. Why does a negative externality cause a shift upward in the supply curve? It's because these external costs shift your costs up if they're included. If they're included in the social costs, they'll shift the social cost curve up. Don't forget that. These two curves actually are two different things. I'm worried now that I'm being a little misleading or confusing when I talk about a shift up, because it's not a shift in the true sense of microeconomics, because they're two different curves. Okay, so I was being a little bit loose with my notation or my nomenclature. Referring to this as a shift is a little inaccurate because actually they're two different curves. The bottom one is the private cost curve. The top one is the social cost curve. Okay. So here is what I think the point is. A government is sort of uniquely has the ability to correct this problem. It's not going to happen on its own. People aren't going to just, for some reason, say, I'm going to stop producing at Q1 because I don't feel like it. If they stop, somebody else will come and just start doing it. You know what I mean? If you're a firm and you're saying, you know what, I don't like that I'm causing this negative externality, I'm going to stop producing it. Well, we have a free market with costless entry into the market. If it's perfect competition, anybody who wants to can join, can start. Even if you have no money in this country, you can borrow money, start a business, start producing the thing, and make profits from it. So it's a pretty strong assumption here in a capitalist country that this P1 and Q1 is going to happen if there's no intervention. It's going to happen. So what could a government do to say that's inefficient? Where we really want to be is P2, Q2. Do I need to take some time for people to understand why we would rather be at P2, Q2? What's so good about P2 and Q2? Anybody have an answer to this? Man, I'm really taking a long time here. Sometimes I'm like Alexander Hamilton. Sometimes I get excited, shoot off at the mouth. I never had a group of friends before. I promise that I'll make you all proud. Let's get this guy in front of a cloud. Counts for real cost to society. Okay, thanks, Nick. Yeah, that's a fine answer. If I ask it on a quiz and you say that, I'll probably give you full credit. This P2 and Q2 is the true measure of what's efficient to the society. That's where the marginal benefit to society equals the marginal cost to society. So it's more efficient. Should the government come in and say, actually, we want to ban this altogether? Everyone's output should be zero. You know what I mean? This thing causes a negative externality. Oh, in that case, let's make it illegal. No one's allowed to do it ever. That would be really inefficient, in my opinion. So what if it's causing a negative externality? Just factor those negative externalities into the equation, and then you'll have the efficient outcome. So this is like what I'm saying before. We shouldn't let it stay at Q1. That's inefficient. We shouldn't have quantity go all the way down to zero. There's actually something in the middle, which is Q2, which is the best socially optimal level. So how do you get there? You could do it with taxes. Taxes are able to do it. So let's now think about carbon. Let's think about carbon as having this negative externality, which is that it goes in the atmosphere, it causes a greenhouse effect, and it raises global temperatures by a little tiny bit. It raises global temperatures, it has an effect on water, thermal expansion of water and melting ice caps, and hurricanes become stronger, fires become more common. Those are all built into what we might call the social costs of carbon emissions. Do we want people to have zero carbon emissions? No, absolutely not. That would be inefficient. If we said, okay, no one's ever allowed to have any carbon emissions ever again. But should we just let the free market determine what it is? And just say everybody who wants to can start a coal factory, a coal-based power plant, and burn as much coal and just have it all just go into the atmosphere. Just let everyone do whatever they want. That's inefficient. That's not just morally wrong, which of course you could argue that's morally wrong thing to do. It's economically inefficient. And if you hear somebody talking about how free markets are always the best thing to do and they're always the most efficient thing to do, it should be really easy to rebut that argument with two words: negative externalities. Negative externalities are not factored into free markets. And because of that, the free market is inefficient. The free market does not get to the efficient outcome. P2Q2 is the efficient outcome, and it's not achieved unless you have some kind of intervention. So what kind of intervention? You could have a tax that, see this like, they have dots here, this distance between the two curves. If you make the marginal tax equal to that, then you force people to internalize the externality, which is what I did. Remember? In the third round of the pollution experiment we did Monday, I said, okay, let's make a tax of 10 per unit. I had actually already calculated before the class. I was up late the night before. It's a true story. I was up late on Sunday night. I thought I would be able to do it really quickly, and I underestimated the amount of time it would take for me to calculate this. So I was up to like 1:30 in the morning Sunday, but I did, and it turned out to be 10. 10. Let me stop the share. I want to go to it. I'm so proud of myself. Can you tell how proud of myself I am? Let's go to the pollution exercise. Okay, in the pollution exercise, yeah, here we go. If the tax per unit is 10, right? That means everyone, out of their own self-interest, should choose a quantity of 9. 9 become, what's going on here? It looks like everything's shifted down one. I didn't mean to do that, but it hardly matters. I think everyone figured out that either 9 or 10, it sort of didn't matter, was the most efficient, a socially efficient level of quantity. That's like the Q2, not the Q1. If it's a free market, you guys would go up to something like 15. I think 15 was the sort of free market prediction, but it would be better for you to cut your production to 9. That would be the socially efficient thing to do. 15 is free market, 9 is socially efficient. Well, did it happen on its own when you worked it out on your own? Not really. I think I have your payoffs in round 1, round 2, and round 3. People actually did better in round 3. Round 3, which had the taxes, on average, your payoffs went up. Of course, there were some people who did particularly well in round 2, like Kevin. Kevin managed to sort of bamboozle you guys to get a large payoff for himself, but he's sort of an outlier, isn't he? I can say for certain that round 3 gave the highest average payoffs. And the only difference between round 3 and the previous rounds was that I created a tax. I didn't force you guys to do it. I just told you what it was. That internalized the externality. So every time you chose to produce something with which was Q, you just gave me a number for Q, but that represents producing something, quantity. Because of the tax, every time you were choosing Q, you were internalizing some of the social costs that you were imposing on the other players in your group. And in fact, the new equilibrium, once you shift up the private supply curve, it becomes a different curve, so it becomes the social cost curve. I made it so that it intersected right at this 0.9, which has turned out to be the efficient level. Does that make sense? Some of you may not have even realized that that was all going on, but it was in this game. Okay, let's go back to, what else do I have to tell you before Friday? I think a lot. Oh, by the way, this is a course. I should tell you that some externalities are positive, aren't they? Getting a vaccine causes a positive externality because once you become vaccinated, you're less likely to spread some disease to other people. So if there's just a free market for vaccinations, let's say, okay, let firms charge whatever price they want for vaccinations and let people decide on their own whether or not they want to get them. What's going to happen? It's the opposite problem. People will get too few vaccinations. You agree? If it's a positive externality, then the social benefits are not included, and therefore the quantity is too small relative to what would be socially optimal. So I think I believe that there's good news that there could be a COVID vaccine. One was already tested 90% effective. It has some other problems to it, and it's also early. You know, I think 90% is good, but I also think it's too early to tell really if this is the best, most safe and effective and cost-effective way to vaccinate people. But the economic principle of externality still applies. You should be thinking about externalities when you're thinking about what does the government do in regards to vaccinations. It should be supporting them. If Pfizer wants to give away free vaccinations, that should be really supported by the government. Yes, please do that because the free market isn't going to get the right amount of vaccines. Have you ever thought about bees? People actually say this a lot. Bees cause a positive externality. If you're just keeping bees on your property so that you can make honey and sell honey, and people still do that in this country. They're like, okay, I want to be a honey farmer, so I'll keep a bunch of bees for the honey. You actually cause a big positive externality on any farm that's within a mile or 2 or I don't even know 10 miles with you, because bees will go fly to these other places, pollinate their plants and fruit, and you'll get more fruit because of the beekeeper. So it's a positive externality there. It's one of the rare positive externalities of a business. Like I'm just a beekeeper business and you're a farm business. And somehow the fact that you and I are close to each other causes a positive externality. That's kind of rare, but that's an example of it. Okay. Yes, this is what I really wanted to get to. Some of the solutions to the externalities are to internalize it somehow, like taxes. Those are called, how is antibiotic usage negative? Good question, Ria. The more people use antibiotics, the less effective antibiotics are in stopping new diseases, because this is I can answer this, because pathogens like bacteria and viruses, mostly, no, bacteria, take it back. Bacteria develop resistance to antibiotics. So if you're thinking to yourself, should I take some antibiotics? Yeah, I will. I'll take them. And everybody's thinking that, yeah, like, let's always just take some antibiotics. What is the accumulative effect of that? Bacteria, which are resistant to the antibiotics, grow and spread faster, which means the effectiveness of the antibiotics to stop the illness goes down. And it's not because the antibiotics changed. It's exactly the same antibiotic. What has changed is the genetic composition of the bacteria. And therefore, it causes a negative externality. In other words, the socially optimal usage of antibiotics is a lot lower than the free market usage. Because, individually, your incentive is, yeah, I want to get rid of this thing quickly. So just give me the antibiotics. And what a good example is, I have a daughter who had ear infections. Ear infections can be kind of painful and unpleasant for sure, but generally they will go away on their own. But if you take antibiotics, they go away a lot faster. They go away a lot faster. And so our private incentive was to, every time this happened where she would get a bad ear infection, we want to go to a doctor, get an antibiotic and give it to her, and she would start feeling better in a day or two, or 3, I don't know. But in terms of society, it's actually better not to do that. It makes you feel sad that your daughter is suffering. But if everybody takes an antibiotic for everything, then you get this issue of more and more bacteria become. Anyways, I think I spent enough time talking about that. I answered your question, right, Ria? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we're running out of time. Oh, we're over time. Okay, so dang, I didn't get to talk about cap and trade. Who's talking about cap and trade? Is it Ryan? Are you here, Ryan? I'm not here.
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, you are here. You're talking about cap and trade on Friday, right?
Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to put I'm going to have you do my job for me a little bit, which is to really explain the benefits of cap and trade and how it perhaps can help solve this problem of the externalities. I don't think I have time to talk about it today. I did explain what cap and trade was, but I don't think I really got into the explanation for why it can help solve this problem of the externalities in an efficient way. But I think you'll talk about that on Friday, right?
Yep, I'll do my best.
Okay. Yeah, so let's postpone that discussion until Friday. Do you guys have any questions about this stuff? Today's lecture was about common pool resources at first, but also negative externalities and why they're inefficient if you just let the free market do whatever it wants, and how governments can help restore a more socially optimal, socially efficient outcome. A lot of times it's with taxes or regulations or some sort of government intervention. Yes, Shreyas just asked me if we only one homework is due for this week, just the one on Friday, and you can pick one or the other. You don't have to write about both. Or you can say neither. Or you can add carbon tax. Add a third thing if you want. So tell me why you think we should have the Green New Deal. Give me economic arguments that are in favor of the Green New Deal. Or give me some economic arguments in favor of cap and trade. You don't have to do both, just pick one. Or say economic arguments that say neither of those two things is appropriate. We'd actually be better off doing something else. Okay? Yeah. Excuse me. I think we should stop there. I'm over time. So unless you guys have any other questions, I'll see you Friday. We will have a quiz on Monday and probably the next Monday after that. I'll send an announcement. Have a good day, guys. I think I'm gonna.
Thank you.